Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Project Stargate. I'm your host, Mark Brenner. Today we have the first content episode of season two. I'm here. I have with me tonight Greg Ship and Vincent Moore. What's going on, fellas?
How you doing? How you doing?
Awesome, awesome. Glad y'all are with us today. Um, so tonight's the first episode of season two, and for all the listeners, we have some really exciting stuff that we have planned for this year. And Greg today as of today, is our historical advisor officially. He's going to be working on some historical mysteries and going to be co-hosting like he did last season. And Vincent is going to be our an occasional co-host as well, and he's going to be our science advisor. So I'm really looking forward to this content that we got planned this year. Moving forward, as far as I know, Greg, that you have a history, no pun intended, of looking into historical mysteries, and um, there's some things that you've been researching recently. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Kind of what we've been working on and what we got coming in the future this year.
Certainly. You and I have been discussing back and forth that around November and December that we were going to look at some mysteries that are historical. A few of them that popped up in my mind were the Mystery Hill, the American Stonehenge in Salem, New Hampshire. It's close to me. There's a few others, including the missing crew of the Mary Celeste, and there was a few other that I was thinking of, including actually the missing disappearance of oh shoot, oh just faded from my mind.
It's okay.
Amelia Earhart. I'm sorry, Amelia Earhart. That's another story that I wanted to cover sometime this year as well.
You know, I was watching a documentary. I think it was a segment of Unsolved Mysteries that they had and with Amelia Earhart, and that was a really interesting segment. It's actually one of my favorites. Um, but anyway, the Mystery Hill, that's something that I've been very interested for a while. I'm also interested in Gettysburg. Um, there's a lot of historical significance of Gettysburg. There's also a lot of paranormal phenomenon that happens there. Um, I think that's something we ought to look into in the future for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's high up on my my travel bucket list right now.
Oh man, me too.
I've had
Um,
so many times, but I never got to go there.
that's a bummer.
Yeah, I lived in I lived in Philly up until like a couple of years ago, and that was one of the places I always wanted to go because even locally you hear so many stories about in Gettysburg, and but it's one of those things I just didn't get to do while I was there until I
Mhm.
moved. So I'd like to go back there too. Really.
That would be a really fun adventure for us to go on. Like Gettysburg is what not only was it a pivotal moment in the Civil War, but also there's so much history out there. Like that battle was just so pivotal in this American Civil War, and I know a lot. I've met several people who's been out there, some of which are paranormal investigators, and there's a lot of that whole area is a paranormal hotspot. And in addition to the history of the battle and what happened there, it's very very interesting. Something we ought to look into in the future. Um, but anyway, um, so Mystery Hill, that's something that I've been very interested in for a while. I know I've heard a lot of things about Mystery Hill over the years, who put it there, why they put it there. I've also heard that there's some of the people experts in the paranormal research field has also said that there happens to be a ley line that goes over it, which I find kind of interesting. Um, I just I can't wait to look into that. That's going to be awesome.
Absolutely.
Sure. But anyway, so moving forward, there's going to be a lot of changes to this program over the course of this year. Among many things, we're also going to be looking into branching out into multiple platforms. That's going to be very interesting. Looking at several options, including Spreaker and Amazon Podcast. Hopefully, we'll come down to a decision on that really soon. But for all you listeners, just stay tuned to our Facebook page, Project Stargate Fringe Research on Facebook. That is the new home of our program, and all of our episodes moving forward will be uploaded to that. So please stay tuned to that webpage in the future for all of our content releases. Moving forward, though, there's some of the other things that we're going to be covering this year, and I've really thought this through over the past few months. As far as Fringe research goes, the many things we're interested in, besides the paranormal stuff and historical mysteries, we're also going to be looking into a lot of fringe science. There's a lot of mystery. There's definitely a lot of mystery involved with that, in the sense that we look at things like subjects like time travel, like relativity, stuff like that, and that's stuff that I've always been fascinated with. And at the end of the day, paranormal phenomenon, there's always scientific measurements you can take out in the field. Like, for example, people go out in the field, they'll go to a location that's supposed to be haunted or whatnot, and then they bring all this equipment, which we have here, like as an example, like the spirit box. This is the Ghost Stop S box. It's actually one of the best, most popular models of this device that you can get. It's upgradable. It has upgradable firmware. They add new features to it. Definitely check it out. So these are available on Amazon and ghosttop.com. So go check it out. It's loaded of features, man. I tell you what, this thing's got SD card ports where you can use to upgrade the firmware to store EVP recordings. This is some really, really cool stuff. Like, I think maybe one day in the future we should do an episode and just talk about this equipment and how we can use it in practical investigative applications. But at any rate, Vincent, you've been pretty busy with some research yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been working on and what we can look forward to in the science end of all this research?
Well, my interest actually starts a lot with astrophysics and quantum physics, and in my opinion, those subjects lend themselves to maybe not necessarily being supernatural, but maybe being preternatural. Because a lot of the things that we're talking about, things that we may not understand, they can be some of these things. They're theorized in quantum physics, exotic particles, other dimensions, the multiverse. Those types of things are theorized right now. You have people that are doing bona fide research, finding out the true nature of these. So the thing about that is, as I've said before, this subject, when you start with physics and astrophysics and things like that, it becomes an octopus. You can go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
Whether there are rumors of, everybody talks about UFO sightings, aliens, things like that. Science is beginning to move in those directions. We're finding, I think we're up to 4,000 extrasolar planets outside of the sun. Some of them, some of the planets are about the size of Earth, maybe a little bit bigger. It's theorized that some of them can support life. So that if we find out these things, and the more we find out about that, that's really going to open up a wide world of things that people can research. So that's really where I am. I stick to science, but I do like to read about things that I hear or things that people say about things like unidentified flying objects or alien life or things like that. So that's going to be a lot of where I'm headed into. I will say too, like when you're talking about the spirit box, when I started hearing about a lot of these devices that a lot of paranormal researchers are using, I started reading about them. I mean, I'm someone that's absolutely uneducated in a lot of these devices. I was a little skeptical at first, but the more I hear about how people use them, the more I become fascinated. I think for a lot of listeners, they might like it if we are using these, we might educate people on how these work. Because like me, I'm a layman with those type of devices, and I can imagine somebody being skeptical. But when you actually go into the science and the engineering of how these devices work, it actually is really fascinating.
That it is. You know, while we're talking about this, there's something I want to talk. I want to bring up just related to this. Very, very cool. This equipment. A lot of people who are in these fields of fringe research, they use this equipment like EMF detectors. They use spirit box. They use lasers. All this in infrared. They have all this equipment that they use in field research and investigative research. And what I'm seeing that this equipment is being used in a more liberal, uh, I guess you could say, a wider variety of different research fields. Like for example, I'll give an example. The I had last year we had Pam Nance with us and Kathleen Martin, and they told me about a situation at Cape Fear, North Carolina, where this guy and his son was having an abduction experience. Well, they went. Pam Nance is a historic. She's a parapsychologist and an archaeologist, and she historically has been more so into the general parapsychology field of research. Um, but as we all know now, there's a lot of crossover with all this different type of phenomenon. Um, and what they did is they went to when they went Kathleen Martin, apparent from my understanding, she actually had contact with this gentleman, and what they decided to do is they had into this an experiment where they would use this type of equipment in investigating other types of paranormal stuff, specifically the abduction scenario. They were seeing UFO sightings near Cape Fear. Their house, the guy, he lives and his son, they live real close to Cape Fear, and they went there to near this guy's house, and they used a spirit box. They got EVPs. Um, the EVPs was telling them to look up at the moon, stuff like that. And then they saw next to the moon there was this really bright object that seemed to be circulating around the moon. God only knows how big it was. And they also got they used all different types of cameras. They used uh, uh, EMF detectors, and they had a lot of degree of success with this equipment. Um, I can't help but wonder: is there a connection with PK or telekinesis, that whatever energy that goes in that drives telekinesis or PK, and these UFOs, whatever they are? Because it seems like there's a lot of similarities when we go out in the field. People who investigate UFO sightings, they investigate hauntings, they investigate poltergeist activity. Well, what I'm seeing here is there's a lot of similarities in these phenomena. Like some people, like for example, there's a lot of cases where people will be driving either a day or night, and they'll have a UFO sighting usually at close range, and then like there'll be electronic interference. There'll be the car will stop. Their batteries and their cell phone drains. It's very similar to what we're seeing in poltergeist cases and hauntings. What do you think about that, guys? Greg, I'd like to go with you first.
It's interesting you mentioned batteries draining because a coworker of mine mentioned some guys checking out one of these trains nearby in Massachusetts that's been abandoned for many years. And whenever they try to take pictures of the inside of the cars, their cameras will like shut off completely until they take them back out. A lot of their equipment their batteries would drain. I have a feeling, it's a very strong feeling that a lot of the type of supernatural entities that you deal with in normal hauntings, and in some cases, even probably with extraterrestrials, they drain the energy to try to make contact with people.
It's like they're using it to manifest. Like,
yeah.
Because a lot of times there's so many similarities with this stuff. I've even seen, which is very interesting to me. I've even seen on some of these videos that the Navy took of those UAPs, as they're called now.
Yeah.
What I found interesting with those videos, Greg, is the fact that the object itself seemed to be really cold, but there was like heat around it. Now, in a poltergeist event, you got something very similar going on. Instead of it really, whatever kind of energy that's being used and in it to manifest a poltergeist situation, it seems to be, instead of releasing tons of heat, it gets cold. It gets really cold.
Yeah.
And that's kind of similar to what we're seeing with these UFOs. I wonder if there's some kind of connection.
Right.
Vince, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, when you look at these things from a scientific standpoint, we're basically using the same energy that we experience every day. Like, an EMF meter, you're using electromagnetism in order to detect anomalies within the area where you are. I mean, electromagnetic radiation is, white light, the light that you use every day. The light that the sun shines on every day uses that. So it isn't really a stretch. Well, actually, let me give you a better anecdote. So in astronomy, there's an object in space called a neutron star, and so neutron stars basically are remnants of like really massive stars, and so their cores, at a certain mass, they're at the end of the star's life, their cores collapse to where it's an object the size of a city, but it has a mass like, I don't know, 10 times the sun, 100 times the sun, really massive object. So once you get to a point where it exerts a lot of gravity and it's very massive. And so once you get to a point where you're crushing matter down to something that small, it begins to create a lot of exotic matter. I mean, there's a lot of theory. I mean, obviously, we've never landed on a neutron star, you'd be crushed. But the theories is that matter becomes something very exotic. And so it's not really a stretch to me that we have all types of matter and energy out here that we don't understand. Right. So I think a lot of these things, we'll find, as I've always thought, we'll find that a lot of these things actually spring from things that we already know. They just occur in ways that we may not have imagined.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. I just see too much. I'm seeing a lot of similarities here, in like poltergeist situations or hauntings in some cases, sometimes both. And then you got these UFO sightings. Even like, you remember? I don't know if did you guys see Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Did either one of you guys see that?
Yeah. Love that. Watch that movie like times.
You remember? Okay, the one scene that really, really comes to mind is when that little boy was being abducted. If you can remember, all kinds of really strange phenomena was happening in that home. You had things moving by themselves, things turning on by themselves, things turning off by themselves. It's very reminiscent of a poltergeist situation.
Yes. Yeah, it does.
And some of the documentation, people document their experiences. A lot of that's in there too. They feel like they're floating. They feel like they're floating in the air. Things are levitating. Like you said, things are moving and shaking, and in ways that are reflective of poltergeist activity. So that makes sense. Like when you begin to connect those things together.
If we could just discover what kind of energy this is, which is probably is, I would think, for the sake of argument, guys, I really believe that this might be 0 point energy.
I was actually gonna mention that people are researching 0 point energy and how it works and if it exists.
I think it does exist, and I could imagine, like my friend Dr. Barry Tapp said to me one time. Imagine having a little box that you put inside your house and have a few cables connected to it, and that little box provides practically a lifetime of energy, a free and clean energy. How amazing would that be?
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah, in an endless supply of energy.
it would be. Um, Moving on, but anyway, that's something that I've been looking into. That's something I've been really digging into is the mysteries of PK, and does it have applications with other types of paranormal activity like UFOs? I've even heard. I don't think it's a far stretch, really. Uh, Bigfoot might have some of these Bigfoot situations that I've read about the testimonies. I've heard of EMF spikes. I've heard of EBP recordings. I've heard of all kinds of other very similar stuff that revolving around Bigfoot.
Hmm.
Yeah,
I heard a few about him. They catch anomaly on infrared, which would eventually disappear. Um, like someone's there, then they're not there,
exactly.
which is
Like,
very far.
yeah, like Bigfoot. Bigfoot. I don't know how many testimonies I've read from fairly credible people, I might add, people who have seen a lot with Bigfoot or Sasquatch just vanishing in a flash of green light. And where are they going? What kind of energy is this? What are we talking about here? I mean, the Bigfoot world is getting very bizarre.
Yeah.
As bizarre as any of these other paranormal subjects. But as I've stated before, and I'm really interested in learning about the science of the paranormal.
Mm.
I go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, I was going to say to say about the Bigfoot. The descriptions that you get of Bigfoot is that these things are like 8 or 9 feet tall. Now, listen, my father is 6'8", and that's not quite as tall, but it's hard to miss him. Like he can't really hide behind things. But here you have these creatures that are 8 feet tall, and all of a sudden they disappear. It would be really difficult for something that large to just go unfound or disappear so easily without
Right.
something else going on there, in my opinion.
Well, that's a pretty good point, bro. But anyway, the science of the paranormal. Um, what call you? So I think if we have a better understanding of quantum science and stuff like particle science and stuff like that, we might be able to get closer to solving some of these paranormal mysteries. Um, the time travel is something that really fascinates me. Um, I've been reading a lot of articles on time travel lately, and there's all these ideas about how time travel works. Like we know for a fact that you can time travel forward in time faster because it happens to our astronauts by a small degree every time they go in outer space.
Time
But
dilation.
the question that really boggles my mind is, can you travel backwards in time? And if so, will it put you in a parallel or an alternate universe, or would it be in the same time continuum?
Mm.
I think scientifically, the only thing that I guess I've heard different schools of thought on this. One of the one of the schools of thought I've heard against traveling backwards is the possibility of paradoxes.
Like the
But
grandfather paradox.
right, but as you said, the faster you get to the speed of light, you're time traveling anyway. I mean that's how that works. So I wonder if there's a way around that paradox. Maybe there's a possibility of getting around that paradox. Also, I've also heard I've heard people saying that at least theorize that when you're talking about higher dimensions of space, that time ceases to be linear in higher dimensions of space. Like to us, in our three-dimensional universe, we perceive it as linear, like one direction, going, flowing in one direction. But it's theorized in higher dimensions. It's just, all points of time exist at the same time. Do
Right.
you understand? Yeah. So
Yes.
there might be a way around that, like everything else. Like sometimes I guess the rules can be broken if you figure them out.
Because one of the interests I have, and I want to clarify this, gentlemen. One of the reasons I'm very interested in time travel goes back to the paranormal. Of the several amazing conversations I've had with Dr. Taff, we talked a little bit about clairvoyance, and one of his ideas about clairvoyance, and I think it's a pretty standard theory in parapsychology today, but sometimes when people have certain type, there's one of the types of hauntings, they call them residual hauntings. And what I'm thinking it might be going on here in some degree is in a residual haunting where you just simply have what looks like an apparition of someone or something doing the same thing over and over like a repetitive loop.
Mm-hmm.
What that tells me, gentlemen, is maybe we're dealing with like a kind of a time warp situation, or maybe like a recording in that time space,
Mm-hmm.
or in that space rather, like a kind of like a memory drive or a thumb drive or a hard drive.
Well, they're like an old cassette magnetic tape. You could record sound on it, and that sound will last for years. Like we have recordings of musicians from the 1900s, early 1900s. That I think that's a form of time travel. It uses science to take something that happened one time in time, and it just preserves it. Same
Yeah.
thing.
Right.
Yeah, and then see, but that opens up a whole another can of worms. Does that mean that what happened in the past doesn't exist only in information?
Well,
In other words, do you understand what I'm saying, Greg?
Yeah.
So what happened in the past, like this conversation that we're having right now, still exists, but as information only, or is it tangible to where you can go back and experience it again? That's the question I have.
that's a very profound. I actually never really thought of it that way. That's a very profound thought.
Because, like, you were when you're talking about paradoxes, and this is what I find really interesting too. If you were to build a time machine, let's say the three of us, the three Stooges, Mo, Larry, and Curly, let's say we get me and you guys, we got together and built a time machine. Okay, so we got it to work. We figured out how to play with nature, and we got in this thing, and we went back in time. Well, what would happen if we killed our grandfather? Would we still exist? And I think the answer to that question might be a big yes, because that might be shifting you into an alternate universe.
Mm-hmm.
I find that the prospect of that very interesting.
Well, the theory of I guess the theories that they're coming up with the existence of a multiverse is that everything possible exists in some fashion. Like we're in a particular, I guess the best way to put it is thread. So right now we're all having this conversation in a different thread, but maybe in another thread, it's entirely different. Like maybe we never met or maybe we met earlier, or whatever possibility that could be out there. So that'd be fascinating. It might actually, you might actually be able to kill your grandfather and still exist in a different thread. Maybe there's a possibility that you killed your grandfather at some point. You know what I mean? It's just that's a really fascinating theory.
The only caveat to, I think to this is you would cease to exist in your original timeline. That'd be the end of you, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
But I mean, even now, there could be timelines where we don't exist anyway. Like, maybe unfortunately, you had a tragic death in some other timeline. You don't exist right now. Or you're the president, or whatever is, I guess, whatever possibility is there is there. That's intriguing. But, I think these are the things, the reason why I became interested in doing this type of show is now we go and ask these questions, and we find people to ask these questions to. That we sit around, because I know I've sat around and pondered these things, and sometimes when I try to voice them, like a lot of people I know, they would think I was crazy. But now we're beginning to find there are people who are asking the same questions and actually going out and doing the research to find them. And so that's why I think shows like this are important.
I do too, man. And I don't do this for money. I don't do this to get recognition per se. I do this because I want this, and this is information we all need to know. Everything from the mysteries of science to the mysteries of history. Understanding our past is a way to make a better future. That's what I always say. And the paranormal. I got. Speaking of which, I'm very pleased to announce, gentlemen, and this is something I'm really excited about. Next week, or next episode rather, on Project Stargate, we're going to have Niara Isley on. For those of you who are not familiar with Niara, Niara Isley is an Air Force veteran. She is an experiencer her entire life, missing time, contact with non-human entities. She, in 3 months specifically of missing time she had when she was stationed near Area 51 at Tonopah. That's going to be coming next week on our next episode of Project Stargate. Just giving everybody a heads up. Can't wait for that. It's going to be it's a good interview. It's going to be a really good show. Going to be really good. But anyway, with that being said, I think this is was a good place to stop and have a break. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this science stuff. I got my head's like swelling right now. I'm so excited about this. Science is awesome.
It is.
You are listening to Project Stargate Fringe Research. You're with Mark, Greg, and Vince. We will be right back.